Vlatko Andonovski has named his 23-player roster ahead of the April United States women's national team friendlies on April 9th and 12th. With two former national team players, we are diving into this roster. We're predicting our ideal starting lineup, discussing what player rotations we want to see, who needs to step up with only two players over 100 caps, and the top three things we want to learn from the U.S. versus Uzbekistan. Like this video and subscribe to Attacking Third page right now to join the conversation in the chat, because we want to hear from you. Welcome into the United States Women's National Team Hour. I'm Lisa Roman, alongside former United States Women's National Team midfielder Lori Lindsey and goalkeeper Jill Loyden. Welcome so much into the U.S. Women's National Team Hour. Before we dive into it, you can join us live on youtube.com/attackingthird. Join the conversation in our chat. And you can listen to all of the U.S. Women's National Team Hour shows on the Attacking Third podcast. Download and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and all the places that you are listening to your podcasts. Hey, Lori. Hey, Jill. Welcome back, Lori. Episode 2 for us. How's it going, Lori?
Great. Always good to see you, Lisa. And Jill Loyden in the house. Good to have you. Yay.
Jill,
I think it deserves an air horn to get us together, Lori. Like a little
all of us live like 5 minutes away from each other, essentially. And it's like we never get to see each other unless you're in another state. So
or on a podcast.
Or virtually.
Yeah, or live on a podcast, exactly.
I know. I've actually seen Jill more than I have Lori, and I've known Lori for longer. But Jill, we are glad to have you here. Two former teammates of each other and friends. It's always good to grow the conversation, expand it to another guest, and have more insight. Lori, yours are great, but I want to stir things up. See what
Lori just talks about the midfield all the time, so we're going to get a little bit deeper dive on the defensive side.
Goalkeepers who? Exactly.
Yes. I guess we'll talk about them. They're important.
They are important.
I'm sure we'll dive into the goalkeeper chat as well. If you are joining us live on YouTube right now, you have a chance to win a $100 Paramount Plus gift card. We are giving it away, and we all want you to win. You can watch Serie A, CONCACAF, Champions League, NWSL matches. Huge congrats to Same but Kelly. She won this gift card last week. All you have to do to win this $100 Paramount Plus gift card subscription is like this video and drop your Twitter or Instagram handle in the YouTube chat without the @ symbol. Don't include the @ symbol with your Twitter handle, and we will pick a winner of the $100 Paramount Plus gift card. So today's episode, Lori, Jill, we're going to chat about the friendlies that the United States Women's National Team has coming up. There are two in April, one of them on Saturday, April 9th. At 5:30 p.m. in Columbus, Ohio. First time playing in the new stadium in Columbus for the national team. And then they come to Philly. They actually come to hang out with us in Philadelphia on Tuesday, April 12th, 7 p.m. at Subaru Park, which is where the Philadelphia Union plays. A bit of a news update from the roster. The last time we did this a week ago, it was just before the national team roster dropped for these April friendlies. And there was an announcement made on Friday, April 1st, that midfielder Sam Ewis will not be attending the April training camps as she continues to work her way through a knee issue. So she will not be replaced on the roster as well. In the past, we've seen Vlatko Andonovski give players time continuing with their club, or in an instance of Kat Macario not traveling from Lyon back to the States. And he has replaced those players, but Ewis will not be replaced in this instance. So the 23-player roster is out. Now it's down to 22 players without Sam Ewis, and we're going to run through it. And I want to hear your starting lineups. For anyone who hasn't seen it yet, we did do an episode right when this roster dropped talking about it. Lori was there. Sandra was there, talking about the different players and who all was called in. I'm going to run through the roster quickly for anyone who didn't listen to that or hasn't seen the roster yet. For goalkeepers, 3 of them, Bella Bigsby, Aubrey Kingsbury, and Alyssa Nair. Defenders, Alana Cook, Abby Dahlkamper, Imani Dorsey, Emily Fox, Sophia Huerta, Naomi Girma, Kelly O'Hara. Midfielders, Lindsey Horan, Jalen Howe, Rose Lavelle, Kat Macario, Christy Mewis, Ashley Sanchez, Andy Sullivan. Forwards, 5 of them rounding out this group: Ashley Hatch, Mallory Pugh, Margaret Purse, Trinity Rodman, and Sophia Smith. Of course, Sam Ewis not listed on this roster anymore. So big chunk of players, 22, a lot of them on the younger side. We've talked about this last time, Lori. When you look at this, Jill, I'm going to go to you first. When you take a look at this roster, are you surprised that anyone got called in? Any of the younger players that called in? Are you surprised at who didn't get called in? We got Lori's thoughts on this before, but I want to hear from you. Is there anyone missing from this list or you're surprised to see?
I think it's tough. I mean, I think there's a lot of young players in there, and I think you need some veterans back in the mix. The leadership, they know the identity, and certainly Kelly O'Hara and Alyssa Nair have been there, done that, and been successful in World Cups and Olympics. And I think you need some of those veterans and maybe a couple more back into that mix just to, like, we're so close to qualifying, and we need that leader when things go wrong, who have experienced it and know how to stay calm under pressure, and who can help guide. Because once you get to your first World Cup and first Olympics, your eyes are so big, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're here. And you need some people like, yeah, okay, we're here. You know, we've done this before, and we're going to do it again.
Lori, when you look at this, I know you did talk with Sandra about this right when this roster dropped, but is there anyone missing that you did want to see on this list that's not here?
I don't think so. I think in terms of the younger players, this is pretty complete. You know, I'm in the same kind of boat as Jill, except you know, you want to have that mix. I think we do already know what the veteran players can do, and we know Megan Rapinoe is still coming back from an injury. Alex Morgan, Kristen Press are starting to get into their form in the NWSL. There's a couple players that Vlatko Ananoski said specifically, I need them to be performing in the NWSL. And in some ways, though, for these games, it does make sense that those veteran players aren't in here, in the fact that they will still continue to get the minutes with their club teams. However, it is a tight window. Outside of these two games, you have two more international games prior to Vlatko having to announce the roster. So this will be interesting. And I think it's more about the mix in these games and who he puts out to be able to see, kind of start to see some partnerships. Yeah.
I love that transition. It is all about the mix of the players, player personnel who you put out there, different positions. We've seen Kat Macario being thrown into the 9 role up top, not her usual role in the midfield. I want to hear it. Jill, we're going to start with you. You are the coach. You've got your cap on. You've got the whiteboard with your marker. Starting 11 on Saturday for the United States against Uzbekistan. Who do you have?
All right, let's start with the goalkeeper, obviously.
Oh,
most important position.
Okay.
Okay. I think Alyssa Nair is our solid one. I think she's the best goalkeeper in America right now. But I'm going to go with Aubrey Kingsbury because I think she needs experience. Alyssa Nair still, she's come back from her injury, right? But the number 2 spot is wide open, in my opinion, with Casey Murphy being out injured, A.D. Franch not being called in, Jane Campbell not being called in. We need an experienced number 2, or at least some experience. You don't want your first cap to be in qualifying. So I would say I'm going to start with Aubrey. She's been the most consistent goalkeeper for the last few years in the league. And I think a lot of people have question marks about her feet, but I think with some really quality players on the back line, that problem will be solved.
All right,
why are you laughing, Lori?
Oh, I'm just loving the conversation already. So keep it going. Let's go. Get your back four in there.
Keep going. We're going your whole roster, and then we'll do ours. So keep going, moving up the line.
All right, I have Fox at left back and Sofia Huerta at right back. I think they're the two most dynamic, creative, but also really quality defensive players as well. And the thing that I like about Huerta and Fox is their intelligence. They understand space. So they can get into those wide channels, but they can also leak in on the inside in the half spaces as well. And their intelligence of understanding where the ball is, where my teammates are, where the opponents are, is just really special. So I think that they can help in the attacking side in those half spaces, but they also can help in our rest defense as well. Center backs, I have Naomi Girma and Alana Cook. I want to see what Girma can do. She has so much talent. And I think when you play against a team, an Eastern European team, you do need some center backs who are quality on the ball. So Girma is good at progressing the ball at the back. And you also need center backs who can help in terms of counterattack. So Alana Cook is like, that's her main job at OL Reign. Her team gets up high up the field, and she's kind of like that center back that can read passes, intercept passes on the counterattack, big, strong player if they try to look direct. So I like that back four.
I'm going to just ask a question about this. So Girma, she plays alongside Dahlkemper at San Diego, but you don't have them starting. Why? I'm just curious. Why alongside Cook?
Yeah, I think Cook can provide us more support in the counterattacking moments. And I think her big, strong physique, if teams look to go direct into their 9 to set play from the 9, that Cook can challenge those. She's good in the air. And when you're playing against a team that sits in, it's difficult to break them down, where you could earn potential corner kicks and set pieces from those moments. And Alana Cook is really good in the air. So that gives you another method of breaking down teams in low blocks.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
I like it, Jill. Keep it going.
Are you going? So you it looks like a 4-3-3 is what we're getting from you. So who are your 3 in the midfield?
I'm going
with goalkeepers in the midfield.
Yeah, exactly. Listen there, the 6th position. I'm going to go with Andy Sullivan. I think she's really good disruptor and quality on the ball, with Herrera and Sanchez. That's my midfield. And then up top, I have.
Sorry, Jill. Who was that besides Sanchez and Sullivan?
Herrera.
Got it. Okay, cool.
And then I got Pew 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 on the left, Kat Macario in the 9, playing in a little bit more of a false 9 position, and then Sophia Smith on the right. And I went with Smith because I think she's going to be important in these games where teams sit in a little bit, and we know that she can break lines in transition. We know how lethal she is when she gets in between and has space to run in front of her. But now I want to see, like, hey, can you break down low blocks? Can you play in quick combination? Can you find space and create space for yourself when there's very limited space?
I love this lineup. I like the midfield unit you have. This is crazy, Jill. I had the same exact back 7 as you, back 4, and then midfield 3. I'm curious about Macario and being that false 9 along with Pugh and Smith up front. What kind of movement do you want to see from them? I know you're mainly focused on the goalkeepers here with Nair in the 6, but we'll get to that substitute.
Listen, hold on real quick. I love this comment, though, from Emily Grace. I think it's Rezer. She's like, Nair would dominate as a 6.
I love that.
No doubt. So listen, you've already got you won some people over. They're on the same page as you.
Of course.
It's true. They appreciate it. So with your front 3 that you have, Macario as the false 9, did you like what you've seen when Andonovski has put her in that role? Or do you think she can provide more being alongside Pugh and Smith up front?
Yeah, I kind of like her in that false 9 role, because when you play against teams who are going to sit in, she can try to come back into the midfield and they can look for some counter movement, either with Ashley Sanchez or Lindsey Herrera making those runs in between. But I also think when she drops back into the midfield, that potentially could open up space for Pugh and Smith to attack, as well as like Herrera can get out wide, Sanchez can get out wide, Fox and Sophia Huerta can come on the inside. I just think that it adds another layer of it's just dynamic. And I think that the movement of Kat can pull center backs out and make a lot of space in between the lines. I think that could be really helpful.
So we have your starting 11 that you're putting out on the pitch. Did you have a first rotation in, or if you had to make any changes, or is this what you're sticking with? I know I'm throwing this at you. It wasn't in our rundown, but is there a first substitute that you would want to see being thrown into this mix? Because the 3 in the midfield between Herrera, Sanchez, and Andy Sullivan, I love that combination. I think that Sanchez and Lindsey Herrera, I really want to see them play together in that attacking role. But who's first rotation for you, first off the bench, do you think?
I know she's injured, but it would probably be Becky Sauerbrunn. Is that an acceptable answer?
But no, she's not listed in the roster.
Just fly her in. Get healthy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm kidding. In the front line, I obviously want to see Trinity. I mean, Trinity is like, she's got everything. She can do it all. She can beat you with pace. She's dominant in the air. And then my biggest question is, like, we know she can do it at the NWSL stage when we're a transition league. Can she do it against teams that are going to make it really difficult? Not sure this Eastern European team is going to be able to provide that opportunity, but I'm looking forward to see if she can do it at the international stage. And I think getting her some minutes and getting her comfortable with the style of play and with the different players, I think that could be really helpful.
I like that rotation, having Trinity in there. All right, Jill, thank you for that. We're going to pass the coaching baton over to Lori, because not one, but two starting lineups we might be getting from Lori Lindsey here. Let's hear them.
Okay, well, I did too, because there's certainly going to be rotations from game 1 to game 2, no doubt, or I at least imagine there would be.
Or you just had to one up us. It's fine.
Actually, that is what happened here, and now we'll go with that. So I am very much similar to both of you. However, I do have some differences. So for the first game, or at least for my first starting lineup, I have Alyssa Nair, because she is in goal. She is coming back from injury. I think, when you think about, to Jill's point, in terms of having some of that leadership when there's very little on this team right now, I have Alyssa starting because I think she can bring that vocal leadership from the back. I don't expect a ton of work for her to do in this game. No offense to Uzbekistan. I think that just could be the reality of these couple games. And but still, that vocal leadership from the back would be important from her. And then I have Fox and Huerta on the outsides as well. In a lot of cases, we already know and seen what Kelly Herrera can do. So I actually have Huerta starting in both games as that right back, because I think it's invaluable for her to be able to get some minutes, to be able to see how she can create. We saw her score a beautiful goal for OL Reign a couple weekends ago. So what can she do from that back position? I will take a step back. I do have Kingsbury starting in the second game, because exactly what Jill's saying, as needing minutes with Bella Bixby and her having no caps yet, getting some valuable minutes, but Kingsbury allowing her to at least come in at halftime, maybe in that first game, but definitely getting the start in the second game. My two center backs, though, for the first game are Goalkeeper and Cook. Again, just, I don't think the center back for Naomi, I'm not so sure she gets called into this camp if there weren't the injuries that we've seen with Becky Sauerbrunn, Tierna Davidson. So that's the only reason why I don't have her starting. I think she's very deserving. She's been solid throughout these first games for San Diego. However, I do put Cook and Goalkeeper in there for this first game. And then I have Goalkeeper and Girma for the second start, just because of that partnership that they have with San Diego, and see what that looks like at the national team level. And then midfield, hell yeah, all three of us are on the same page. I do have Sullivan, Sanchez, and Herrera. I think, again, we've seen Rose in there. We've seen who else? We've seen Christy Mewis quite a bit. So just giving Sanchez and Herrera to see what they look like, especially in these games. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. I have Sullivan starting in both games of that 6, because I think this is an important 2-game series for her in terms of solidifying that position and what it means in that position when you do have a team that's potentially going to sit in that mid to low block that we've been talking about. And then up top, I have Macario as 9, Smith on the right, and then Pugh on the left. And in particular, same as Joe. In particular with Macario, one, I think she's been lights out with Club and Country recently, and no doubt bright future, is I think we can all agree upon. But I like her in that 9, because I do feel like she's starting to come into her own and feel the tempo of the national team a little bit more. There's a lot of discussion. Do we play our wide? Do we play our attacking mid? And especially leading up to the Olympics last year, I don't think we quite saw her capabilities. Then a little bit of a coming out party at the She Believes Cup, and her movement seemed more confident. So, but I think with Herrera helping set play with Sullivan, but then also her abilities to get in behind, and then Sanchez, we've seen her in the NWSL being able to get into more attacking positions. I think that could be a really interesting mix with those three of Herrera, Sanchez, and Macario, especially in those central areas. And then Jill said it perfectly. I can't go against that with Pugh and Smith and their abilities to get isolated, hopefully serve dangerous balls in. And I think ultimately it'll be how do they partner up with those outside backs. For Smith, it'd be Huerta, and then Pugh for Fox. But real quickly, I'll just go to round out my last my second starting lineup. So for Kingsbury, I said Goalkeeper and Girma anchoring the center back position, Huerta again, and then I have Imani Dorsey because I would really like to see her. I think she adds something that we don't. She's been really solid for Gotham, and I just interested to see her at this level and continue to develop her game. As I mentioned before, Sullivan in that number 6 again, and this time I have Mewis and Lavelle. So I think that gives you quite a bit of a different look. I think it would be important in this starting lineup, though, then Chrissy Mewis is more of that help out with Sullivan, her ran role, more of a number 8 than just getting into the attack. But then up top, Hatch, Purse on the right, and Rodman on the left.
I love the rotation that you're throwing in there. I want to take a look at Josh Ka, I'm going to say, in our chat. He said, this is a good chance for younger defenders to get time with Alyssa Nair. I really like this point, especially as you mentioned, Lori, you're starting in your first game, Nair in the back with Dahlkemper and Cook. I like that group and that core group of defensive trio right along the center back down the spine of the team. You mentioned Andi Sullivan. She's getting the start in both of these for you at the 6 role. And you talked about having to play against a team that's most likely going to sit in that low block. As a 6 for Andi Sullivan, what is her role offensively against a low block?
Yeah, an outlet consistently being the one that's going to help set play. I think always offering support. I think at times, depending on who is the mix in there, her ran can drop deep and help set play as well. That allows Andi to get higher up the field. But in a situation that I think that we're going to see the U.S. team in, just pushing numbers forward isn't always going to be the most fruitful. So can Andi, with playing quickly, helping set the tempo, whether it's side to side, whether it's quick little slip passes in centrally, then I do think that will be her role to be able to, kind of pull this Uzbekistan team out of their defensive shape as much as possible. But again, it's just going to be an outlet, constantly moving the ball. I have that, and we're going to talk about that later, kind of like what we want to see. But that is one of my things is like Sullivan. How can she help with the tempo? Because I think a lot of times when we talk about patience, we think, oh, we need to slow the pace down, but that's not the case. You can play quickly, you can still decide, okay, let's look for the next pass. Let's look for another pass until it opens up and there's more clear opportunities going forward.
I love these lineups that we have. As I mentioned, mine is very similar to yours. I have Kingsbury starting, Fox, Cook, Girma, and Huerta across my back line, Andi Sullivan, Herrera, and Sanchez in the midfield, and Pugh, Hatch, and Smith up front. I want to see Hatch with players like Pugh and Smith and what that trio can do, because they possess a lot of the same initial tendencies, but their talents are different from each other, because Hatch can also drop back and receive the ball at her feet and then quickly spin out. And I think that if Hatch can drop into that hole and try to receive that ball with Pugh and Smith running diagonally off her shoulders, that could be really dangerous and a fun way for that front 3 that is younger with a little bit less experience in this type of situation to try to break down a block. But first off the bench for me, I have Rose Lavelle. I would like to see her alongside Sanchez as well.
Yeah,
in that midfield. I think
that's
that Lavelle and Sanchez together will be interesting. Honestly, Rose sometimes gets the ball and she just runs in front of her. And I want to see what Sanchez does and how she reacts when Rose takes off with the ball. Is she going to try to help support that, or is she going to try to make a run off of Lavelle's run and receive the ball that way from her? The support between those two with Sullivan sitting in behind, I'm actually super excited to see kind of how that rotates through. But Macario up top too, I love that. I think we're going to see it. We saw it before with Vlatko Andonovski and how Kat Macario can be in that 9 role and be a withheld 9 supporting so much. I love these starting lineups. I like that we got a little bit of rotation. Who's coming in off the bench? Lori, above and beyond, A+ for you. Sure, fine. Overachiever, giving us 2 starting lineups. And Jill, of course, you giving us yours, and maybe we'll see Nair in the midfield. But Jill, yes, you have a thought.
Yeah, who are you guys putting the captain armband on?
Oh, I love this question, Lori.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Jill, go for it. Jill.
I'm going to go with Andi Sullivan. That would be my captain.
Yeah, I was kind of leaning that way too. I think with the lineups that I have, I would probably go with Goalkeeper, with her starting the 2 games. However, I do think Andi Sullivan is a good shout, and I think that's an interesting one to play around with it a little bit as well to give that confidence to say, hey, we do see you as that impact player, somebody that needs to be vocal, also lead by example. And no doubt, I think we've seen Andi do that. And I still feel like with Sullivan, there's this like a whole nother level, right, that she can get to as well.
I honestly think with the midfield, I have Sullivan, Herrera, and Sanchez. I think Herrera would get to wear it in this opening match, especially in my lineup. I have Fox, Cook, Girma, and Huerta across the back line. So Herrera being my experienced leader in that midfield. But we gave our starting lineups. We talked and touched on how Uzbekistan is most likely going to sit in a low block. So how does the U.S. combat that? What do they need to do in order to break that down? And so many times people talk about, why is the U.S. playing a number 45 ranked team? Well, there is a reason and a method to all of this madness. We're going to talk about it right after this quick break.
Paramount Mountain, the place where entertainment lives. Home to bumblebees, owls, and birdies. Giant hippos and flying jackasses.
Let her rip, tater chip!
Yep, this mountain's full of surprises. In fact, I'm not even Tim McGraw.
Soy Dora! Later, muchachos!
You can catch all of those great shows on Paramount Plus. And if you are joining us live on YouTube, you have a chance to win a $100 Paramount Plus gift card. All you need to do is like this video and drop your social media handle in the chat. That's Twitter or Instagram. Do not put the @ symbol, but drop your name in the chat and we will pick a winner. Congrats to same but Kelly, who won last week, $100 gift card. So you can watch NWSL, you can watch CONCACAF, you can watch Serie A, lots of great content on Paramount Plus. But we're talking the United States women's national team ahead of their April friendlies. They are playing Uzbekistan, number 45 ranked team right now. A little bit about the competition. It's the first time that the U.S. will play Uzbekistan. It is the 55th different country that the United States has played. That's huge, I think, because soccer is growing. There are more teams, more competition. They are ranked number 45 in the world right now and number 7 in Asia. They played in the Turkish Women's Cup during the February FIFA window when the United States played in the She Believes Cup. During the Turkish Women's Cup, Uzbekistan went 1-1-1. They beat Lithuania 1-0. They fell to Ukraine 2-0, and they drew with Venezuela 0-0. So conceded 2 and scored 1 in that 3-game matchup, so they can get on the board. They also can hold a team to 2 shutouts in that type of Turkish tournament, the Turkish Women's Cup that we saw. But now playing against a team like the United States, and we talked about the roster, who we wanted to see in that starting 11. What is the point and the purpose of playing these friendlies against a competition that is number 45? So many times we see fans talking about this on social media and the competition, and we saw this in the friendlies at the end of 2021. So our top things that we want to learn from the women's national team in these April friendlies, let's dive into it. Lori, when you're looking at these teams, we talked about the low block and that helped dictate a starting lineup that you wanted to see for the United States. What is Vlatko Andonovski looking for, whether it's from this group of players, this type of competition, or even leading up to the start of World Cup qualifiers that he needs to see?
Yeah, well, I think we should take a step back. I think to your point about playing a team like Uzbekistan, who's ranked number 45, it's not as simple as just like, closing your eyes and like throwing a dart, right? And like hoping that you get like a higher ranked team. I mean, I do think it is important to remember that there are still some COVID implications in regard to all of this and getting teams to come over. And then there's TV rights deals for US soccer. So it's not as easy as just like, hey, let's get the top teams over here, especially when a lot of the top teams are European based and they're about to play in the Euros and they're not wanting to travel to come over to the United States right now for whatever reason, right? Because they want to play competition. So there's a lot to mix in there. So I think that is important. However, I still very much think that there is, like, regardless of the ranking and the growth of women's soccer in general, this team will be an interesting feat for the for the United States, because I think it's always asking questions. How can we continue to get better? We've talked endlessly about how young this core group is, what that's going to look like in compared to the NWSL, which we know can get pretty spread out, wide open, transitional league. And I don't think this game or these two games are really going to offer a transitional type game. So then it adds another layer to it, right? How do players, and Jill touched on that with her starting lineup as well, how do players react? How can they be impactful in the same way when you don't have as much space? So all of that said, the three things that I think that Vlatko, or listen, if I'm the coach, what I would be looking for is one, patience in the buildup. And I kind of hit on it a second ago, which is sometimes we think of it like, when we think of patience, we think, okay, we have to slow things down. But we know that the U.S. likes to play at a fast tempo. We know they want to go to the goal as quickly as possible, and you want that in their DNA. But sometimes that is not always the best way to break teams down, because then it's turnovers. You get frustrated if you're not scoring. So what does that look like? And that's when I talked about Andi Sullivan being critical in terms of helping set play, switching the point of attack when necessary, and just being a bit more patient, still moving the ball quickly, but also finding that extra pass when it's necessary. Where is the team giving you? Is it out wide? Do they shift quickly and try to lock you in? So is it on the other side? So patience in the buildup is the first one. And then two, I think one of the most critical things is the positioning of our outside backs with our wingers. When teams sit in a low block or a mid block, you have to find ways to be able to break that down. And I think I saw this watching the U.S., especially against Czech Republic in the She Believes Cup. A lot of times our winger and our outside back will be in the same plane, and it's easy to defend. Mm-hmm. So what is the movement? What does the pairing between those two look like? Is one coming in more centrally, one staying wider? Because then you ask questions. If you're stacked on top of one another, the defensive team just has to shift, and it's easily, so we end up putting ourselves under more pressure instead of asking questions of the defense. So that pairing and the positioning of that. And that's where I think somebody like Huerta could be really shine in these games, depending on, is she coming central, helping out with an Andi Sullivan almost as a 6, and then also being able to cover ground to get wide when we do lose the ball. And then
Lori, before you jump to your third point, TJ Trex here in the chat saying that he'd love to see an experiment with a 3-back. It's almost kind of what you're saying with Huerta sliding forward and into that 6. Do you think we could see a shift with either one of Fox or Huerta in the outside back position really staying high?
Yeah, well, TJ Trex, I just want to say that name. Thanks for the comment. Listen, I think this is a really interesting conversation to have, because we can talk about formations all the time. And really, it's just about movement and fluidity. So it is kind of what I'm saying. Yes, let's say they are sitting back pretty deep, right? Uzbekistan. Then ultimately, it is going to look like a 2 or 3 back, depending on how many people that Uzbekistan puts behind the ball. So it actually, starting positions might be a 4-3-3, but eventually as the game moves on, then that's when it comes to the players, and that's what I'm talking about, the movement. Case in point, I don't know how many people on here watch the Bayern Munich men's team. They do this all the time, though. They have a back that goes into the number 6 position and helps, like, with movement of the ball when they are in possession, right? And so this is exact same thing. And we've seen Huerta, I mentioned her, but she does that with OL range. She will get into the attack more centrally and help circulate the ball around. So again, it depends on our positioning. It depends on the movement. The tempo has to be high. It can't be slow, otherwise it's too easy. But it is about being patient, and then ultimately players being able to step into where the space is.
Yeah, so you have patience in the buildup, the wingers and your outside backs, and making sure they're on the same page, but not in the same plane of the field. You have a third point for us, the third biggest thing you want to see from this.
And then Sullivan. I mean, I've mentioned her a lot of times. She will be the glue to this team in terms of movement of the ball, in my opinion, and being an outlet every time, because there's going to be times, if we are being patient, where a floated ball in or a low percentage ball that's just floated into the box isn't going to be on. So if Sullivan is going to have to be the person to say, hey, demand the ball, again, circulate it around, look for the little slip balls into Macario or Herrera or Sanchez in our hypothetical starting lineups, right? But yeah, I think she's going to be key. Extremely important to this team, and her getting these minutes in these games as she so does, then could be invaluable for this team going forward.
I think you made great points about all three of that. The patience in the buildup is going to be huge. Does the youth of this roster play a role in almost having to learn and make those decisions on the fly, because they don't have a veteran in Becky Sauerbrunn in the back line to dictate how the tempo of the game is going to go and keep things moving? Who is the player that's going to need to do that in the patience, but also keep the ball moving?
Yeah, Sullivan, because I think there's times too when, if we go up one side and are attacking on the right-hand side, if it's not on, then Sullivan being that outlet, or whoever the midfield is in terms of rotation, to be able to pull it back out to see if you can pull Uzbekistan out of a low block in itself to open up more gaps. So instead of just continuing to go, can you find those moments, say, hey, it's not on, we go back around, then something opens up, right? Because you've pulled them out of their low defensive shape.
Great points from Lori. Jill, I want to pick your brain on this too, especially you have a bit of a defensive mindset as a goalkeeper, and you tend to look at that as well. But against a team like Uzbekistan that probably won't put too much pressure on the United States back line and even test a goalkeeper that frequently, what are you looking for in this game? What are some things that you really want to see from this side?
I think for a long time, the U.S. has been known for mentality, athleticism, speed, strength, all those things. And I think that one thing that we have been critiqued on or questioned on for a long time is our football intelligence. And I think a game like this could provide a lot of opportunities for players to read the game, find space, make space, exploit space. And I think that way that we're going to have to be versatile instead of just relying on, using some of our dynamic players up front. I think that is going to help us, like, as we prepare for World Cup qualifiers. You're going to play against teams that sit in low blocks, and football is growing in the world, and qualifying for the World Cup is not a given for the US anymore. And Lori and I know that firsthand. We were on a team that had to do the playing game, right? Like, we lost to Mexico in the semifinal, and it's not a given. So having an opportunity to refine that and experiencing it for young players is going to be important. But like Lori said, and I think sometimes a young player is more inclined to see the goal and go, and those services that we're talking about into the box, we're over it, all right, or past that, we're moving on from that. So I think it's going to be important for those young players to get experience and feel comfortable and be patient, even though they might feel like they have an opportunity at that moment to go 1v1, to just keep it and maybe open up better opportunities. So I think one would be the versatility, the experience, and then obviously getting younger players some confidence, because, rolling a ball downhill gains so much more momentum. And we're watching Sophia Smith and Mal Pugh be taking advantage of that momentum and that confidence right now in the league. So, when forwards are flying, they're feeling good about themselves, they're unstoppable at different times. And one thing I always have to add in something about the goalkeepers is another way that you can break that low block is something that we see Ederson doing, and something we see Ter Stegen doing, is coming out high out of the back with the ball and dribbling past the center backs. And what that does is it draws pressure from the front line toward you, because they got to get pressure on the ball. And typically when the front line, the first line steps, then the midfield also steps. But if you don't get quick enough pressure on the ball, the back line drops. And what happens, the midfield stepping and the back line dropping, there's heaps of space between the lines for the goalkeeper to find that pass into. And if the back line decides not to drop, then you can play a ball in behind that back four into seams where you can utilize those quick players. So I think goalkeepers in this position, playing against teams that aren't going to press, have a real advantage to create numerical overloads, especially in the midfield.
Those are great points you make. One thing that you mentioned, Jill, is not being able to just send balls in over the top, attacking mindset wise. I mean, the goalkeeper joining in and breaking those lines of press 1 or 2 is fantastic and definitely necessary. But once the United States gets the ball into their attacking end, and when we look at, let's use both of your starting front 3 with Pugh, Macario, and Smith up top, and Herrera, Sanchez, that front 5 unit, what kind of attacking patterns do you want to see from them? What are the different options for unlocking a block?
I mean, I'll go a little bit. I think, when you look at a Macario, we know that she can stay high if she wants and open up some space and play back to goal. She has that ability, but also she likes to drop in and get on the ball as well and look to see if she can get turned and faced up. So, that's a very simple one. If Macario is dropping in, then who's getting in behind then and asking those questions, right? Because then that forces a center back to have to step in, or do they stay? And then where is the space if they stay? Who's picking up Macario? Who's not, right? And then that becomes an easy understanding of where the space is. It's either in front of the back line or behind, depending on the timing of the ball as well, coming from the run. So that would be one that's a very general and very simple one that we could be looking for easily. And then also something that Vlatko and Anasi talks a lot about, which is the triangles on the outside, the winger, that's that near side midfielder with that outside back. And again, that goes with like the positioning of in particular, the winger plus the outside back on where they are. Are they more central? Are they out wide? Or is it opposite, right? If Sophia Smith is on the right side, is she cutting in? Does Huerta need to provide the width then? What does that look like? So, I mean, all of those movements are dependent on how we're moving the ball. And then also, what is the defense giving you? So it's easy for us to maybe sit here and come up with some stuff, but really are they shifting? Are they not shifting? Are they just staying? What time of game is it in? Are they exhausted? Right? Like, can you, I mean, I think Jill made an interesting point about dribbling too. A lot of defenses are set up for passing, to deny passing angles. And that's what makes Rose so special when she's in, is because she wants to dribble. She wants to dribble at speed. It's so difficult to defend because a lot of teams aren't accustomed to that and they don't want to defend that 1v1. So, that will be interesting if Rose isn't starting. What does the defensive structure look like? And can they bring her in and getting the ball deeper roll and then start running at the back line?
One thing, Jill, you mentioned earlier is one of your key points that you want to look at is getting these younger players experience. And as Lori alluded to, so much of this game, there are no timeouts in soccer, newsflash, and there's nothing that you can almost reset.
Heard it here first.
Yeah, you heard it here first. If you missed that Bayern Munich game, now you know. They don't have time to kind of reconnect. So it's so much about having that footballer IQ and understanding the game and different ways to do those types of things. When you look at this younger group that's looking to get experience, that also needs to have a high football IQ, how do they do that on the fly, and what kind of needs to happen for them to problem solve mid-game to unlock a team that's sitting in a low block?
I mean, yeah, we're talking about younger players, but we're not talking about inexperienced footballers. I mean, you look at Mal Pugh, she won a World Cup. She was on the World Cup team. Sophia Smith, she is doing it at the highest level in the world, week in and week out in the NWSL. So like Macario, yes, she didn't maybe not has that much experience with the national team, but she just scored that amazing goal in Champions League. I mean, come on. These are really intelligent football players who have done it at the highest level, who can figure out things on the fly. I mean, they're playing against some really tough defenders each week. And it's just going to be about their communication and their patterns of moving into space and finding those little gaps, which we see Pugh and Smith do so well up top, and Macario finding the space in the midfield. So, as much as we are talking about their youth, I think that these are really experienced younger players that maybe aren't coming in just out of college like we've seen in the past. So they're, seasoned almost in an NWSL, seasoned vets at this point.
Yeah, they exactly are. Someone leaving us a comment, Christopher, in our chat, asking about Rose Lavelle and types of roles that we could see her in. I had her as one of the players coming off my bench, slotting in alongside Ashley Sanchez in the midfield, because I want to see that partnership. But for Rose Lavelle, even this last weekend in the NWSL, Laura Harvey at Olive Reign played her on the winger. She was occupying those wide spaces. When you look at a player like Rose Lavelle and maybe this type of game, look into your crystal ball as to what to expect in this, but where can Rose be utilized in the skill sets that Lavelle has? Is it more centrally, and what can she provide when she is on the width and in the flank for a team like this?
Well, I was going to bring this up because Laura Harvey did speak to that directly, and it is mentioned by Christopher Meister, I think is how you say it. Meister. Apologies if I'm not saying that correctly, but about Laura Harvey kind of protecting a Rose in those games. I personally, though, I didn't bring it up because I don't see Vlatko playing Rose as a winger. I think he strictly sees her as one of the best number 10s in the game, and knowing that they want to keep her healthy. He might not start her or start her depending, and she might not play the full 90 just because of that. But I do think that the number 10 position is her best position. I think that's where she'd be the most utilized. I do think the NWSL suits Rose the most because she is so electric when she's picking up the ball in a little bit of a deeper role and then has time and space to be running at back lines. Again, it goes to directly what I was talking about, which is so difficult to pick up as a defender. The last thing you want to do is chasing Rose Lavelle or defending her 1v1. Excuse me. No, thank you. And I was a midfielder. I was like, that'll be the last thing I didn't want to do. I'm like, where's Listen there? Help. You're getting the number 6. Tackle. However, I think that is a wise choice for Laura Harvey and what her team needs. And given the players that they have and it being a long season, I just think that Vlatko right now is strictly going to view Rose, or does view her as a 10. And given that the strikers they have would rather see who they have in the actual wing position that plays that position more often than he would in terms of putting Rose there.
Merchant Princess, giving a comment about Sanchez, Herran, and Lavelle combo in the midfield with Herran sitting back as the 6. Jill, you're shaking your head. Thoughts on this combo? I know you have Sullivan in that 6 role, but what are your thoughts on this trio?
Didn't Vlatko already try Herran in the 6, and it just didn't feel right, and I don't like it. And give me Andy Sullivan in the 6 all day.
But is she the only one on this roster that can play that 6 role?
Howell can.
Okay.
Howell for sure can. I think Howell will come off the bench. I don't know if we see her starting. And they're actually 2 very different players, Howell and Sullivan, in the way that they play that position. So still very much a competitive spot there. However, right now I give the upper hand to Andy, just in the way that I think that what these games are asking for. I think that fits Andy's tool set more than it does Howell. And Andy has some more experience, and I think that's what you need in the center of the park in these particular games right now, especially given all of our points that we've made, limited time heading into the qualifiers.
The only other player that we've seen consistently play that, Julia Ertz, not called in, announced her pregnancy today. Congrats to the Ertz family.
Like, she's been pregnant for a year. Like,
yes. So, okay, before we dive into our last little segment, final thoughts from either of you on your starting lineups, on player rotations, different combinations of players that you want to see in these games, or anything else that you really want to learn from players or personnel or problem solving in these next 2 friendlies in April. Jill.
Yeah, I think everyone freaked out when we tied, what was it, Croatia
Mhm.
in 21. And I think it's a work in progress. And I think we need to be patient that not every game we play is going to be a dominating performance like we've seen in the past as football grows around the world. And if we want to continue to push the envelope and continue to grow football in our country, we're going to need young players to eventually step up. And I think we just have to be patient in that process and not expect 10-0 wins every time we play somebody that's under ranked number 10, you know? So I think patience from us as supporters and fans, I think will be really important as much as patience in the game will be.
Yeah, and I'll add consistency. I think when you start to put in players that don't have a lot of experience at this highest level and limited caps, then consistency starts to become really important because that is an element in terms of winning a World Cup, qualifying for a World Cup, is being able to at this level showing up and putting in great performances every game. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't going to be mistakes, but we're seeing that we saw that on the men's side, right? With qualifying as well. There's so much talk about just the ups and downs. We play one really good game and then drop points in the next. And it was this young mix of players that had to go through some of those growing pains. And, more and more with club soccer for women being more pertinent and important, this national team is going to have less and less time together compared to what it used to. So having that consistency, creating that camaraderie and those partnerships is just going to be vital. So that's a lot what I'll be looking for too, is from game 1 to game 2, do they still have those high standards, and can they put those consistent performances regardless of the scoreline, even though is a one parameter that you'd be looking at.
There's so many different things to keep an eye on in these two friendlies. Again, they're Saturday, April 9th, and then Tuesday, April 12th for the United States women's national team against Uzbekistan. Our final segment before we end out our U.S. women's national team hour, we have Jill Loyden here, who is goalkeeper extraordinaire. If you haven't known it already, she's loves to talk about goalkeepers. She's intelligent when she does talk about it. She runs the Keeper Institute. So anyone that is looking for some goalkeeper expertise or their children reach out to Jill at the Keeper Institute. And I think it's at the Keeper Institute on Twitter. That's where you can find her and a lot of her different coaching techniques that she does. I've had the pleasure of spending the last few days with Jill, and I was picking her brain constantly about what I could learn being a goalkeeper. I'm not a goalkeeper. I've never played goalkeeper. I never want to play goalkeeper. I like my face and my hands. But I want to talk to you, Jill, just ask you some questions, specifically looking at this goalkeeper trio that Vlatko Andonovski has pulled in Bella Bigsby, Aubrey Kingsbury, and Alyssa Nair. Alyssa Nair has 79 caps at the international stage, and Kingsbury and Bigsby have 0. How does this type of friendly against a team like Uzbekistan, how does that influence getting caps for Bigsby and Kingsbury or getting Nair back into that mix? When you look at these 3 goalkeepers, what stands out to you about them?
Yeah, I think we know what Alyssa can do. She's good at claiming balls that are served into from the flanks in the wide areas or deep service. She's really good at coming out authoritatively and winning crosses. It's just her bread and butter. She has phenomenal range in her pass. I mean, she can hit a ball with such precision, and I think that could be really useful in the evolution of the position. I think we're going to start seeing goalkeepers evolve more as like 6s than we are traditional 1s who can just shot stop. And I just think it adds another element to be the +1 player. You're always up a +1 in possession. And I think that potentially Alyssa Nair's distribution could be even something more that they use to their advantage. With that being said, I think that's Bella Bigsby's big question mark for me. I think she has done well in Challenge Cups and earns a call up, rightfully so. Younger player who let's throw her in and see how it goes. But I don't necessarily think that would be that important this close to qualifying. I think getting Bigsby a camp, seeing how she does, giving her like an IDP to work on to go home and like continue to evolve and develop would be important. I think the main focus should be on Kingsbury and getting her minutes, getting her time, getting her experience. We saw this happen to AD French a couple years ago with Jill Ellis. Her first cap was against England. I mean, come on. What did they call it? Something by
Baptism
fire?
by fire.
Yeah, there you go. And that wasn't, in my opinion, being in AD French's position at one point in my career, that was not setting her up for success. And you know what she did in that game? She picked up the ball outside the box, and it caused a free kick, which they scored on. And you know, obviously as a goalkeeper, we have to take responsibility for that. But I do think that wasn't the best setup for her. Getting her some minutes beforehand probably would have been more helpful, especially I think that was in a lead up to a major tournament. So I think getting Kingsbury some minutes would be helpful. I think that she's consistently proven that she can do it in the NWSL against some of the best forwards in the world. And let's see how she does. Give her that confidence, give her that backing that I think she rightfully deserves. And then obviously we haven't even talked about Casey Murphy, who I don't know what her injury is or timeline in return to play. But if she's in the mix, that is a different conversation for her, because I think that she would be the focus, I think, next after Alyssa. But again, yeah, we know what Alyssa can do. Maybe that second tier goalkeeper position could be open. And I don't know if Murphy has enough time to break in as the number one. We've seen some tools. We see that she has the capability to come up with some big saves.
You're okay.
Sorry.
It's okay, Jill. It's all right. It's all right. Families, lives, we're doing these from our homes. We get it, Jill.
You know, that's Kate Sheridan's dog, so you guys can blame her, okay? No, I think that if there was a little bit more time, that Casey Murphy could put a little more pressure on Alyssa there. But with this being so close to qualifying and potentially a World Cup, I don't know if she has enough time to do it.
So you mentioned Casey Murphy. What about Jane Campbell? She was in the mix a little. AD French not called into this. Thoughts on those two?
AD French and Jane Campbell. That's a good question. I don't think Jane's done enough in the league. I don't think that she's done enough in the league to put her name in that mix. I thought that they would have played her, bringing her all the way to Australia, and they didn't. And whether that was a great performance by Casey Murphy in that first game and they wanted to see what else she could do. But I don't see them in her plans. I think she has a lot of tools, but we really haven't seen the best of her yet. And I think it's been quite a long time waiting to see the best of her, and we just haven't seen it yet.
Lori, you had something you were going to ask Jill earlier.
Well, I wasn't going to ask Jill, but I think Jill touches on this with goalkeepers and giving the confidence. And I think that's what's interesting about this young group. Just with my final comment is that when you get a taste at the national team level, it is a different level than NWSL, and it just instills confidence. So then when you go back to your club team, there's a higher level that you demand. And I kind of touched about this, I think, even last week, Lisa. But that's why it's so important for these goalkeepers, for somebody like Kingsbury, to get on the field in one of these games, because then it does help her in terms of that confidence. And then you take that back to the NWSL, and it raises everybody around you. And so I think this is an interesting, really, really critical time and interesting time for our U.S. women's national team, because we're going to start to see that, you know, that level being raised by quite a few of these players that are just getting some of their first caps underneath their belt. We've already seen that with Ashley Sanchez. She deserved it from last year, but getting called in, you get that little taste. And now her game is already even raised even more with the Washington Spirit. Same with Trinity Rodman, right? So,
yeah, a lot of great things that we've touched on throughout this, looking at our starting lineups to what we want to see from these teams. And Jill, thanks so much for letting us pick your goalkeeper brain. We hope to have you back to do it again. Before we close out, final thoughts on anything goal scoreline prediction for the first match, if you want to give that to me. But final thoughts, Lori, I'll go to you first.
Okay. Oh, goodness. The goal, I have no clue on this one. I think it really depends on, it actually doesn't depend on who they roll out. I think it just depends on the chemistry of the players. Doesn't matter really about the attackers. I think we have tons of goal scorers. But I'll just go back to what I said, which is consistency between the two performances, getting some of these players some good experience, and building the momentum heading into the final 2 games prior to qualifiers.
Jill, final thoughts from you?
I hope Mal Pugh scores so that we can hear pew, pew, pew goal call.
I love it. Hoping for a pew, pew, pew goal call. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. United States plays Saturday, April 9th, and then again on Tuesday, April 12th. If you like this video, drop your social handle in the chat and look out for a DM from us. You could be our Paramount Plus subscription winner. Follow us on Twitter at Attacking Third for more. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube to catch our interviews and to get alerts from when we go live. YouTube.com/Attacking Third. We'll be back next Monday for another U.S. Women's National Team Hour with Lori Lindsey. We'll recap the game on Saturday and take a look at what is to come for the Tuesday match. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Jill, thank you for being here. We hope everyone has a great day.